everybody. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, welcoming you to another First Look Thursday stream where we're going to take a look at a RPG. Not really fair to call it a first look. This is a game that I've flipped through before, but have not actually had a chance to play it. So it's kind of first look plus, we'll call it. But tonight we are going to be taking a look at. Let's see if I can get the reflection to work there. There we go. Sorry, upside down. We are looking at By Moonlight, a game which I kickstarted, I guess maybe 2 years ago, potentially. But I think it came out last year. Could be mistaken. 2023 copyright. In any case, so yeah, we're gonna dive into it. We're gonna take a look at the game. I've got my PDF pulled up, and we're gonna basically be going through the book, mostly page by page. We're not gonna cover everything. We're definitely gonna try to get to whatever we can, and so that at the very least we have a sense for what the game is about, and of course, what the game is trying to do. Damian Williams with 23 months, coming up on 2 years of sponsorship of this channel, and using his member message to say, "Oh God, another Derek forged in the dark stream." There's been several. Hey, listen, it's one of, if not my favorite system of all time, so it's hard to say no. Additionally, I didn't choose this. That's right, the patrons did. The Knights of Last Call patrons, of which you can become a member by checking us out. There's a link below, patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. They get, among many other privileges, including exclusive access to our Discord, they get the ability to vote on what topics that we're going to be talking about. And in this case, this is one that has been being championed by several people. In particular, London Moonlight in the chat, London, who is a sort of actually now our number 2 ranked patron on our Discord. He supplanted me today. I used to be the number 2 highest level person on my own Discord. Now I'm number 3. I've been supplanted by London today. I'm a little bit behind him. Anyways, London has been playing By Moonlight with Play by Post, I think. And London, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But has been a champion of the game and been introducing people to it. And so it led a campaign, and that's why we're talking about it tonight. So we're not going to waste too much time because, we got a lot of stuff here to cover. I do want to give a quick shout out to Frosty in chat, another member of the YouTube channel. Happy Thursday nights. Happy Thursday to Frosty. Big shout out to Pepper and KC. What is up, everybody? Tortuga, hello, hello. Solana, fantastic. So let's see if this is the game that gets me to try Forge in the Dark. Would love to see it. Paladin Actual, good evening to you, sir. Good to see you. Lance Quagmire is here as well. London confirms campaign 1 wrapping up, end of month. New one starting May 1st. 2 spots still open. And that is the way Knights of Last Call Patreon goes. We have a ton of community games, and almost none of them, I don't think any of them are 5th edition. There's a lot of places to play 5th edition, but if you're looking to play something else, we usually have a bunch of those games going on at almost all time. All right, let's head over. All right, By Moonlight by Andrew Gillis. Now, I kickstarted this because I love Forged in the Dark games. Going into this, couple of caveats. I'm not a big anime fan, as is well known. That being said, I do have a certain appreciation for the kind of older school animes, one of which is Sailor Moon, which I probably have never seen more than 20 episodes of. But I always thought the idea was kind of cool, and even up into the Powerpuff Girls. So this idea of By Moonlight is this idea of magic girls, and that trope in manga and in anime is this idea of people who live 2 lives. They sort of have their superhero life and they have their regular life. And that idea, whether it's anime or if it's comic books, like American style comic books, I think is really interesting. And so I think that's what's primarily interesting me in this game. And as we get into this, of course, we're going to be looking to evaluate this on a couple of different factors. One is the game very clear and direct with what it wants us to do and what this game system is to be used for? Does the game give us the ability to do the things that it says that it wants us to do? And then if we do the things, does the game reward us? Which is a big part of that. And those of course, are Jared Sorensen's big 3 questions. So here we have A Girl by Moonlight, authored by Andrew Gillis. Don't know if they've done anything else. I don't really recognize too many of these other names, although one name does stand out here. John Harper, the man, the myth, the legend himself, doing layout and graphic design. So this should be top notch. We also see some of our usual evil hat people here, Fred Hicks and Sean Nittner. So, yeah. And we have attribution here saying based on Blades in the Dark by John Harker. So very clearly, shouting out the origin of this game. Andrew is here. Hello, Andrew. Hi, I'm the author of the game and confirm this is my only published work. All right, Andrew. Well, here we go. So let's get into our table of contents. And of course, we'll quickly scan through this. Now, one of the things here, we've covered Forged in the Dark games a lot on this channel. And that doesn't mean I'm going to skip over them. But one of the things I'm really going to be doing here is sort of contrasting the differences of the Forged in the Dark sort of core system that we would typically see in, say, Blades in the Dark or Scum and Villainy, and seeing what changes Andrew made to shift the sort of mechanics of that game in order to fulfill their vision. So we've got our introduction, and already we can see a little bit of a difference here because there's this idea of series playsets. When we typically think of Forged in the Dark games, Blades in the Dark is set in Duskwall. Scum and Villainy is set in the Procyon sector. So this is already kind of giving us this idea of 4 different options, which is kind of interesting and neat. And I could say that the Kickstarter came with 4 cool little pamphlets that you can use to kind of play these mini, I don't know what to call them, micro campaign settings, but I am interested. We'll take a look at those. We've got playing the game. We've got the core systems of how the game works, which is fantastic. And already we can see some new tech here that we typically don't see in a Forged in the Dark game. Transcendence. Consequences and harm. Looks pretty standard Forged in the Dark here. Resisting consequences. Looks pretty special. It's pretty normal here. Lost death clocks and gather information rolls. Then we have our phases of play. Classic structure of Forged in the Dark games is that you have this sort of proceduralist, semi-proceduralist playthrough where you kind of move from different elements of the game. And in a traditional Blades in the Dark game, you sort of move from the heist to the after effects of the heist to planning the next heist, back into the heist, and you keep going around in circles. So then we have our references for our playbooks. These are Forged in the Dark's version of classes or character classes, although they're a little bit more directional than most traditional D20 style character classes. And then our GM, which in this game is called the Director, we have a very short few pages here talking about their agenda and how to use the series playsets. What there's more time spent on than what, again, you would see in a traditional game here are these series references. So let's go single page here. All right. So I'm just going to read this so that we kind of all know what we're working on here. Girl by Moonlight is a game about the tragic struggles and defiant triumphs of a group of magical girls resisting an oppressive society. It explores the heartbreak of denying who you really are and the transcendent power of relationships and community. So again, role-playing games can be, as much as they can be about heroic struggles and, heroic adventure, we can also use role-playing games to explore some really deep and sensitive and meaningful issues as well. I've talked about this on this channel before, but one of the reasons I really love Monster Hearts by Avery Alder is because on the surface, it's a game about teenage werewolves and vampires kind of being shitty to each other and not really being all that in control. But under the surface, and you look deeper, and there's a lot of allegories there for the isolation and loneliness and disconnectedness that so many people feel as teenagers, especially people in the queer community. So, Girl by Moonlight is a role-playing game, and in the course of play, you will improvise descriptions of the fictional world and its characters, listen actively, great phrase there, to the other players, and engage with the game's mechanics at appropriate moments in play. just saying everything that I love about not only role-playing games, but Forge in the Dark games in particular. Engaging with the game's mechanics at appropriate moments in play is just chef's kiss. All players share in these responsibilities, another thing which I am a fan of. The game is collaborative. We all contribute and build on each other's contributions to create a compelling story. You can think of a role-playing game as a structured conversation, so all the normal etiquette and considerations of having a conversation apply. Listen to each other and respond to what others are saying. Ask questions often and be open to adjusting your ideas. So this is Blades in the Dark 101 here, but said very well. The art is very reminiscent of thirsty sword lesbians in a way. At least that's what it reminds that to me. And I can clearly see maybe some Sailor Moon tropes here, at least on this character on the left. Kind of looks like Tuxedo Mask a little bit. So this is kind of the why. We talked about this, like, what is this game about? And I like it. I'm a big fan when games come out and tell you what they're about. Some games will come out and say, this game is about anything, and you can use these rules to do everything. Okay. That's probably not true. One of the things that I always say is that, a game that knows what it's about can build and direct and guide towards that outcome. So this game builds on the magical girl genre, in which we see young women with magical powers transform into an alter ego to fight evil. The game reinterprets the classic examples of the genre to create an allegory for self-discovery and queer identity. This text uses magical girl as a shorthand, but your magical girls need not be girls necessarily. Rather, they are people whose identities put them at the margins. They must conceal their true selves, conforming to the world's suffocating expectations, even as they work in secret to transform them. I will say, I appreciate that the magical girl doesn't necessarily have to be a girl. But I don't think it. I mean, if you're going to play a magical girl game, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to say, maybe you should try playing as a female character. But that's just, I get, we want to be, everybody could be everybody, but I would be fine with it just saying, this is a game about magical girls. So we introduce to help us portray. So that is why we're going through all of these extra systems. We want to portray the struggle between the characters, right? Between their hidden regular identity that suffers in silence, if you will, and then their super powerful magical identity, which has the power to affect real change. And they call this transcend and eclipse. So when a magical girl casts off the compromises of their day-to-day life and embraces their true self, they transcend, they take on a new form and tap into power that they need to change the world, right? So they turn into the super powerful magical girl form. But when the responsibility and expectations become too much to bear, when their light is overwhelmed by turmoil, they fall into eclipse. They make fatalistic choices, give in to doubt and fear, and turn away from their lofty ideals. So this has shades of Darkest Self, right, from Monster Hearts, in Monster Hearts, if your character in certain instances, especially if they take too much harm or something bad happens to them, they can trigger their darkest self, right, and really kind of highlight all of the bad elements of your character, and it's really a freeing and fun way to play the game. How are you going to get your tuxedo mask without boys, though? Okay, fair enough. I mean, I'll buy from you. I mean, but still, the front and center, it should be this. So anyways, so they fall into eclipse. Along with the internal danger. So again, we have this internal struggle between who you are, who you want to be, who you're forced to be, who you really are, right? Highlights the external pressures that weigh on the heroic self. So this is classic, this is classic superhero mythology here, right? We're talking about magical girls here. Their day-to-day lives leave them surrounded by obligations to family members, to social institutions. But we could be talking about Peter Parker, right? We could be talking about Spider-Man and Peter Parker, and him having to choose between, saving the day and being Spider-Man, or, does he make the date with Mary Jane? And potentially has, people in his life who don't understand what he has to do and the sacrifice he has to make. So this is very, root metaphor material here that extends beyond just this one genre. This is why the final and most important theme of magical girl stories is friendship. Hiding your true self while trying to save the world can be too much to bear alone, and when all seems lost, our heroes have each other to lean on. Okay, so this game is saying it is about three things. It is saying it is about embracing the internal struggle between who your character's sort of super empowered magical self, their sort of compromised hidden version that they use in order to fit in and meet, sort of fit in with expectations. So that's number one. Number two, we focus on the external pressures that force us to have to compromise who we are and make tough choices and make tough decisions. And then thirdly, it is about friendship and finding friendship in others and using that strength to get through it. All right, so that's what the game is laying out for us. So how do we play? Well, we're going to be a protagonist. We're going to get a playbook. And again, a playbook is a form of a class. We'll take a look at that. One player is the director, a.k.a. the GM. And they will, do all the stuff that GMs do. And the director will take their cues from a series playset that determines the nature of the fictional world and the themes of the story we tell together. So this game comes with 4, but basically this is a theme pack, right? This is a sort of a pseudo campaign setting, but it's not just about the location. It's also about what are the themes, what are the ideas that we want to explore in this particular campaign. I think that's really interesting and really, really fun. It reminds me a lot of Avatar and how, well, I mean, in some cases, any playbook, but in particular, Magpie with masks and Avatar in particular with the balance. When you pick a playbook, you're doing more than just picking what abilities that you want your character to have. You're also highlighting what is the core essence of the struggle that my character is having to go through. If I choose the icon playbook in Avatar, I'm having to choose, I get all these cool powers, but I'm also going to be focused. My character arc is going to be about the balance between role and who am I? What's my role? What's my identity? And then who am I? And who is myself? And who am I, the person that everybody wants me to be? Or can I be my own person? And how do I find a balance between those two things? Which I think is really, really cool. Except this is doing it, I think, on a campaign level, which is really interesting. All right. So I like coming out and saying like, hey, the GM isn't the only person with an obligation here at the table. So if you're a PC or a protagonist, you have a job here, right? You have to be a fan of the other players. You have to play to find out what happens. You have to reveal the inner world of your character. And this is a fantastic set of advice to give to a player because number one, too often people are focused only on their own character. Being a fan of the other players means that you're going to be looking for opportunities to set them up. You're going to be looking for opportunities to tie in with them. You're going to be looking for opportunities to make them shine, and you're going to be paying attention to them, being a fan of other players. Now, that language is usually found in a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games, but in the GM session, or in the GM section, I like that this is on page 8, and it's very clearly aimed at the players. Number 2, play to find out what happens. Another classic PBTA Forged in the Darkism. But again, normally found in the GM section. Here it is front and center to the players. It is saying, we are here. The reason why we've all gotten together is to find out what's going to happen. We don't want to find out what happened in advance. We want to be open to change. We want to see where we're going to go with this and be communally surprised, shocked, saddened by the actions that are occurring in our game. And lastly, and I think this one is super important, reveal the inner world of your character. This is not, I'm reading this as, this is not the time to keep your feelings to yourself. Let the people at the table know how your character is feeling. Don't play coy. Don't play, don't keep it bottled up. Be very deliberate. Even if your character isn't being deliberate, let the people at the table know what is going through. Sure, your face is a mask of stoicism, but inside, right, your heart is breaking. Let people know that. Isaiah says, reveal that inner monologue. Yeah, I think that's great. Share that with the table. I think that creates more powerful story moments and definitely gets people to connect better with your character. And I think that that's super important here. All right. See, look at this here. Raven is a music student. I dated a girl named Raven once. It's a little weird. Raven is a music student. At night, she sneaks out of her mother's house to join her friends on magic adventures. Why is Raven so eager to run away from home? Right. So there's that external trauma, the problem with your day-to-day life. Hymna is a revolutionary forced to serve the institution she rebelled against. She is still trying to find a way to make peace with the dangerous Leviathans. What hope is she clinging to? Again, that inner struggle between what you're forced to do and who you want to be. Our playbook is going to help define that. And of course, if you're not used to Forge in the Dark games, then the playbooks can be not just defining what your character can do mechanically, it's also a guide for the type of play that your character is going to create at the table. So Raven, in this case, is the harmony. That's her playbook. She is a relationship embodied. Her song can change hearts, and she can inspire her allies to carry on, come what may. But what is the cost of leadership, right? That almost sounds like a balance track from Avatar Legends, which I love. And here we have, similar to Monster Hearts, these magical girls stand as a metaphor for queer self-realization, and their magical transformation is an allegory for their own self-discovery. And I would take it even a step further. I mean, I certainly enjoy Monster Hearts, and I find it to be a very fulfilling game. And I don't identify as queer, but I think that we all can certainly empathize with the idea of not being comfortable with who we are, or not understanding who we are, or maybe feeling conflicted about who we want to be. And that could be for a lot of reasons. I certainly think that queerness is one of them, and I certainly respect the author's decision to directly state that. But I'm saying that, a lot of times people read these games and go, oh, it's not for me. I'm not queer. Okay, well, all right. Well, number one, open your heart a bit. But secondly, I would say, we all go through things like this. And I think that using role-playing games is a method and a vehicle that we can use to explore ideas and concepts that might either be affecting us right now, or maybe they're ideas or concepts that, we would hope we would never have to face, but we'd like to sort of explore that idea anyways. And here we have the director. That's the GM. So be a fan of the other players, ask compelling questions of their characters, and build on those answers to those questions. Again, great advice for GM. And how do we spend that? Now, here we have the series playsets. The game is divided. So this is new tech here. The game is divided into playsets, a collection of materials that guide play for the group. Think of these playsets as a set of tools for authoring a particular kind of story. These series also provide an episodic structure. Interesting. I like that. And guides play towards a climatic finale. This is something I've seen more and more over the last few years, and I think I like it a lot. I've seen it in PBTA. I'm seeing it here in this game, which is really being more upfront about structuring your game from the get-go, and being okay with sort of pre-constructing this idea of an arc and saying, this is what our campaign is going to be about, and everybody should know how many episodes we have left in the season, right? This is not your classic D&D game where it's like, well, we might play for 4 to 5 years, maybe we'll get 100 sessions in, but maybe we'll do 150, 200. We'll see where it goes. I think that these games want to deliver more quickly than that. So we make this decision as a player. We make the decision about what our series playset is, and then we will collaboratively world build, and to build these details of the series by answering the questions posed by the playset. So very cool. Very, right off the bat, collaboration, and I love it. All right, so here are our series. We're going to take a look at these. So again, the game comes with 4. These are just like themes of how you're, because a lot of people say, oh, I like Blaze in the Dark, but I don't like that it's in this dark sort of, Victorian England ghost punk setting and everybody's a criminal, right? I like the game. I just don't like the setting. So I think it's interesting that this game can not only flip what the game is about, but do so in a way that allows you to sort of touchstone on a bunch of different ideas. And this is where I'm going to definitely show my ignorance, because I'm probably not going to know any of these. So At the Brink of the Abyss is about redemption and heroism. It has an optimistic outlook in which monsters have hearts, often fragile hearts in broken in need of healing. The powers of the protagonists are pure and truly good. We're trying to make the world the better place, right? So this is classic, yeah, this is classic Sailor Moon stuff, right? Like we're good people and we're trying to do the right thing. And, even the villains, they could be redeemed and they could be saved. And, there's danger, but it's more uplifting and it's more optimistic. And we're all working together. I do not know Steven Universe by Rebecca Sugar. I guess each series has its own little icon. It's kind of cool. This must be the Brink of the Abyss. Okay. So this is the art, I think, for Brink of the Abyss. I'm guessing. Maybe. I don't know. And then this is our next set of artwork. This is definitely looking a little different than the artwork that we just saw. So this is Beneath a Rotting Sky. Tragic magical girls doomed to an inevitable fate. This is about tragedy and betrayal. Most, if not all of the characters will be complicit in the world's oppression with little hope of redemption. The protagonist's own power plays a role in their undoing, and the story then their story ends with an almost inevitable tragic fate. Though the series is bleak, there is still struggle and triumph and moments of brightness against them, all the more luminous against the black drop of a crumbling world. Well, that is completely different. There's almost an element here of some of the stuff that's done in Apocalypse Keys, right? Which sort of takes its real touchstone from the Hellboy series, right? Which is the idea that these characters are good, but they're evil, right? And they're trying to fight against it, but it's almost a losing battle, right? It's almost a Sisyphean task that no matter how much they struggle against this inevitability, fate and destiny are going to conspire to sort of bring about the world's ruin anyways. But what can we do in the meantime? And what can we save? We can't save it all. Maybe we can save a few things. This is obviously very grimdark. Inevitably, my players will probably be like, "Oh, this is the thing that Derek would pick because he loves games where everybody's depressed and suicidal because of stress from the horribleness of the game around us." But we'll play with this. I do not know Madoka Magica, so this again, I don't know. This is my ignorance coming through here. All right, so this is our next one. This art is very cool. I'm a big fan of this. This is A Sea of Stars. Oh, so here we have mecha pilots struggling against extinction at the hands of the Leviathans. This is about institutions and hope in the face of extinction. The protagonists are captive heroes forced to fight a slowly losing war against an overwhelming enemy. Shades of Ender's Game here. All while being alienated from the people they protect. They rely on the engines, which must be their mechs, to stand against their flows, and the engines in turn are fueled by their emotions and transcendent powers. And this is I do recognize Escaflowin. I don't know that I've ever played it, but I mean, who doesn't love mecha pilots, right? And this is interesting. Now I know that it says it's transcendent here, but I think this is interesting, right? Because we'll see how it actually operates. I don't know. But I do think it's interesting because we normally think of magical girls, right? We think of you're an ordinary person and then magical twirl, you swirl in the air, magical stars come off of you, and now you're glowing and you have diamond skin and you're really powerful. But maybe you could also just get in a mech, right? And this is what we mean about like the fictional mechanical narrative and interaction in these games. Mechanically, we are a regular person, and then we're a super powerful badass. How we get there depends on the fiction. It could be a magical transformation into a glowing diamond girl, or maybe we hop in a mech. So it's really, really interesting to see how you can use this to create similar outcomes, but with wildly different stories because of the way that you're approaching the fiction of the game using the same set of mechanics. A+. We'll see if we get there. But and lastly, I have no idea what to expect from this art. Maze of Dreams. Dream travelers seeking the truth of a magical conspiracy. It's about desire, culture, and a mass culture, and ideas developing a life of their own. It is filled with guarded hearts whose truths can only be found in dreams. I think this is the one that people said is like Persona, but not quite like Persona. I don't know that game, and I don't, other than Persona, it's the only thing I know. So I would not be the person to touch about this. So this feels like this is much more about, less fighting and more investigating, more figuring out dark secrets and sinister plots and all this other stuff. So very cool. All right, so how do we play the game? Well, again, we've covered a lot of this stuff a million times, but again, paper, pencils, make sure everybody is comfortable, both physically and emotionally, and protected. All this normal stuff we set up. We choose a GM, a director, who's going to be our protagonist. We pick a series playset that we like. We work together and we build it out. All right, what does its cycle of play looks like? Now, again, this is a Forge in the Dark game. So again, when we think about Blaze in the Dark, we think about that sort of quasi-proceduralist play structure. 4 phases repeat to form the rhythm of game. Each complete cycle is called an episode. And this is something I've heard a lot of people complain about with Forge in the Dark games, where they say it's too much like a board game and it's too procedural. And I really think they're missing the point, which is the point of the proceduralism is so that you can remove decision-making and you can let the dice and you can let the mechanics of the game put you into some place where you might not have ordinarily gone. And then the game sort of returns control back to you and the players. And now it's your job to make sense of it all. It's your job to work with what you got. And I find that to be fantastically fun. Far more fun than me just getting to make everything up as I wish. Anyways, I digress. Each episode is broken into the following phases. Obligation, okay, that's new. Downtime, that sounds exactly the same. Mission, that sounds exactly the same. And fallout, that sounds exactly the same. So the only thing that's new here is obligation, which will be interesting. Now, normally we would call that free play. Well, sort of. In a Blaze in the Dark game, you would have free play, which would then go into a score, which we would call a mission. That would go into downtime, or I'm sorry, which would go into fallout, heat, and then it would go into downtime, and then it would go back into free play. But it's interesting. So a session lasts about 4 hours and typically will include a full episode. Okay. So it sounds like they're saying they want one session to have one obligation, one downtime, one mission, one fallout. Okay. In the obligation phase, we see the protagonists in their regular lives. They work through mundane difficulties and oppressions, the ever-present pressure of a hostile world. The obligation phase gives a brief but essential look into the day-to-day struggles of the protagonist and helps show us how their daily struggles and their magical adventures are connected. We see the world they dream of changing. Interesting. So, free play doesn't really have a lot of structure in Blaze of the Dark, but this sounds like this might be more structured in that regard. I mean, this is sort of like when you're an ordinary person, right? In downtime, we pursue our own goals and form genuine connections. This is an opportunity to change things. Again, very similar to Forge in the Dark. Mission is our score, right? This is where we go out and we try to get shit done and change the world, hopefully for the better. And then in the fallout, this is such a critical point of the game of Forge in the Dark, which is we see the aftermath of what you're making. We see the successes, we see the positive things, and we also see the consequences. We see the unintended consequences of both success and failure. And it's that unexpected outcomes that keeps the story keeps the story feral, which I really, really love. Yeah, look at this. Fallout phase exposes new complications and antagonism. Beautiful, right? If the players win and they win all the time and they win everything and they kill everything and they beat everything and they solve all the world's problems, then what are you going to do next session? And if the problems that you're facing just keep repeating on repeat ad infinitum, then it quickly becomes boring and stale. So this is just classic Forge in the Dark stuff here. Episodes follow this pattern. Episodes in turn compose seasons, which represent a narrative arc, and the season always ends with a significant confrontation. All right. So more about the player agenda, which again, I'm not going to go into here, but we kind of touched on this, but I think this is really, really good. But I do want to highlight this. I think this is good advice for any people out there who are role-playing in a more character-focused game. When portraying characters in the game, include descriptions of their emotional world, whether directly what they say or do, but also indirectly through description. Give the players at the table insight into something maybe their characters don't know. I think that's really, really, really cool. Good advice. Hold on, but lightly. Keep hope in your heart. See things through a queer lens. Gaze into the broken mirror. So again, just giving us these advices here to guide and focus our play. Now, before we get into the core systems, I do want to take a quick look at a playbook. One thing I like to do with a lot of these games is, to take a look at basically the character sheet so that we know, we kind of know what we're looking at and what we're working with here. So this is one of our playbooks. This is for a playbook called the Enigma. And let's put it right there. We can take a look at this. So this is, again, like a pretty standard Girls by Moonlight. So this is our playbook, Enigma. And again, each playbook is not only going to decide what mechanical features your character has, but also what are their, sort of what are they about? Like what does their character really kind of represent? So we can type in our series name here, where whatever campaign we're playing in, our real name, our true name. What is our role, background, obligation, and promises? We'll get into that. What do we look like? And then we can see here from a Forge in the Dark game, we have pretty much. It looks like we have our standard. We have our standard powers, if you will, and abilities. These are our actions. This is how many D6s we're going to roll. And already, this is what I love about good graphic design. Okay, let me gush a little bit here about what Andrew and John put together here. I can already tell just from looking at this character. Now, to be fair, I am familiar with Forge in the Dark games, but these are your actions. And I'm going to say something. This is not Andrew's fault. This is not really John's fault either. But one of my biggest gripes about Forge in the Dark games and Powered by the Apocalypse games is they use these terms like action, and they use the terms like moves. And people have so much of a bias towards those words that they treat these things as like mechanical buttons to push. And that's exactly how these games don't work. So I always kind of lament the phrasing and the terminology that gets used, especially in PBTA. But to a certain extent, I think actions is kind of a bad term. But I digress. Anyways, what's interesting here is in a game like Blades in the Dark, you have 4 actions for each category. And in Blades of the Dark, they're prowess and presence and something else. Here, they're sun, moon, and stars. Now, I will say that by in and of itself means nothing to me. I can kind of guess what that means, but it's a little bit, more flavorful and thematic. But what I do love is you can clearly see here that if I wanted to take a point in Defy, I would roll a D6. And if I wanted to take a second point in Defy, I would now roll 2d6. And if I take a third point in Defy, this graphical symbol and sort of the iconography of the game is telling me I only get that third d6 when I am in my super magical girl form. And I just think that is a really just clever use of the game. And again, I could be wrong here, but I'm willing to bet I'm right. Which again, I think is really, really, really cool. So it's just a great example of how character sheet design is super important, and it can really, really help you identify, what your character is doing. So that's just A+ design right there. And then here we have our XP tracks for when we take things on the moon and the stars to determine if we get a level up there. And we see we have our standard playbook stuff here. Stress. Okay, so now this is really interesting. Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay, so in Blades in the Dark, you take stress. You can take stress from pushing yourself. You can take stress from resisting consequences. But when you reach your maximum stress, your character suffers a trauma in classic Forge in the Dark. right? Your character becomes bitter. Your character becomes haunted. Your character becomes angry. This very much shades of Monster Hearts, where when your character's stress fills up, it appears that you go into Eclipse. And by the way, the terminology here is very similar to Monster Hearts. In Monster Hearts, when your character goes to their darkest self, you know, your werewolf goes on a shitstorm and starts killing, innocent people maybe. The vampire manipulates everybody. But there's a way, each darkest self has a way to escape it. And we can see that right here on the terminology. So if we're playing our character, and if you're playing your character, what I'll say, if you're playing your character hard in a Forged in the Dark game, right? And you really want, and this is so good because, okay, stress, and again, I know this isn't really part of the first look, but I just want to explain things because it's important for you to understand why these games work, not how they work. I mean, that's cool. You should learn that, but you should pick up the book. By the way, we have a drive-through RPG link in the description if you want to buy it, and we get like a couple percent towards our KLC affiliate fund, which we use to buy more PDFs. Here's the thing that is really important. Stress in Forged in the Dark games. Don't think of it as, you can think of it as whatever you want to think of it, but the truth of the matter is, what it is currency that the player can use to control the story, right? When you are playing a game like this and you go to take an action, right? You may want to succeed because by succeeding in that action, you get to decide what happens in this moment. I convince the person to help us. I break through the alien lines and I get to the HQ, right? That's what happens when I succeed. I can use stress to take bonus dice. And by pushing myself, I can take bonus dice. And that means I have a much greater chance of succeeding. Additionally, I'm assuming that when bad things happen, when consequences come up, I can choose to take stress and say those consequences don't happen, or they happen in a much lesser degree. Stress is my ability as a player to control the world around me, which is really, really cool because I'm exerting that power. But power comes at a cost. And in this game, if you're getting all the things that you want because you're spending your stress and you're saying, hey, that bad thing, it didn't happen. Hey, that good thing, I made it happen. Hey, that other bad thing, it didn't happen. The game you eventually have to pay the piper because eventually your stress will fill up. And if you basically kind of, I don't want to say hog the spotlight, but if you are making it so that your character is kind of kicking ass and taking names and resisting all the consequences and succeeding at all the action rolls, you are going to put yourself in a position where you are going to eclipse. And that means that we are going to give up some of that narrative control of ourselves because the eclipse phase is going to force us to act in a certain way, right? Who we are, who you really are clearly isn't done enough. Only the mask is worthy of their love. You reject all aspects of your everyday self and embrace the most superficial aspects of your persona. Give them what they know, give them what you know they want. Effortless beauty and extravagant drama, right? And of course, this is going to vary from each playbook to playbook, right? But the mask, the enigma, character here is clearly, look at this. Your transcendent and mundane selves lead separate lives and no one knows that they're the same person. So when we eclipse, basically we're like, my ordinary self, that person's a loser. I'm dating myself here, but like, it's like Steve Urkel and Stefan Urkel, right? And like, there's this scene where like Stefan Urkel, like he's so vain and he wants to like permanently control Steve Urkel because, he's kind of taking over control. That's a strange way to make a comparison for Magical Girl, but it's really, really interesting that rather than just go to this trauma, which to be fair, I think is a useful tool in Blades in the Dark and Scum and Villainy, I think this is a lot more interesting. Again, shades to me of Avatar Legends, where in Avatar Legends, you have your balance. And of course, the goal of Avatar Legends is to stay in balance. But as your character gets pushed to the extremes of their balance track, they can be pushed off their balance track, over the edge. And when that happens, your character has sort of an eclipse moment, and your character gives in to some of their more base urges and some of their more darker impulses. And it takes the story in a very much more interesting direction. But you got there because you were able to control the story up ahead of time. So very, very cool here. Now, we have this Transcendence track, and I do not know how to read this. So we'll get to this. Yes, and I think somebody else said, you escape Eclipse when you show someone the truth of their heart and you reveal your identity to them. They add a promise about keeping your secret. So again, the big thing with this character is you're Hannah Montana, right? Nobody knows that Miley is Hannah Montana. And so like that's the big thing about your character, that nobody knows who you really are. If you go into this Eclipse phase, right? Miley is dead. You are only Hannah. You are only the superstar. But then if you want to escape that sort of narcissistic cycle of self-destruction and effortless beauty and drama, you have to sort of show someone the truth of their heart and reveal your identity. Conan says, iCarly. Sure, iCarly too. Right. So this is what I was saying. Like these genres, these tropes are very, very, common amongst all this stuff. So very cool. And again, involving the other players, right? So that's very interesting. Now, transcendent ability, we've clearly got the ability to mark this up to 4 times. I'm not 100% sure what this means. Obviously, transcendent is the opposite of eclipsing. I just don't know how we get here. We have what looks to be a pretty standard Forge in the Dark harm track, along with a harm clock, which I don't like harm clocks. I always house rule them out. I just find it to be, we'll see what the rules here are, but I just feel like the harm is bad enough. Having a clock to repair it is tedious. That's just my personal take. I even house rule that in Blaze in the Dark, so that's not anything against this game. Now this is a new section down here at the bottom. Links. So this is our friendship. This is going back to Apocalypse World, right? This is history, HX. And we can spend these links to help our allies. Very interesting. Okay. So this is a different resource that we get by making friends. And then we have our XP. And I've talked about this before on Forge in the Dark. At the end of a session, you're going to ask 4 questions. And if it happened once, you mark 1 XP. If it happened multiple times, you mark 2 XP. And this, remember, I always say this. Remember, the game has been telling us what it's about. Now, let's see if it puts its money where its mouth is, right? If you do the things that the game says that it's about, does it reward you? And look, we are playing a game. I cannot stress this enough. It's not called role-playing. It's called a role-playing game. The reason we're playing it with a game is because we want to be part of that cycle of game mechanics and reward mechanics. Whether you realize it or not, you do. And the game should reward you for doing the thing that the game wants you to do. Let's take a look. If we address a challenge with mystery or ostentatious action, we mark an XP, or we do it twice. So what does this mean? As players, we are encouraged to challenge or address a challenge in the game and do it with mystery or ostentatiousness. Very cool. This is a reward which is promoting us to play in a certain play style. 2, we express our beliefs, drives, role, or background. This basically just says, did you role play? And if somebody role plays their character and demonstrates some of the, what I'll call softer elements of the character sheet, you get experience points. If you figure out a way to do that multiple times, then you get 2. 3, you struggled with issues from your promises or your obligation. So basically, did the stuff in your life bother you? And again, this means that as a player, right? Think about it this way. We're not all familiar with Blaze and Magical Girl, but imagine we were playing. This was a superhero game, and imagine this character was Peter Parker. Well, during the course of the game, right, we just want to go fight Doc Ock and stop him from, destroying the city. But, right, our professor is trying to get us kicked out of school because we're always late and we're always, we're never showing up. And there's maybe chemicals missing from the chem lab and he thinks I'm responsible, right? So now I'm like, oh, I got to deal with this guy too in my normal life where I'm just plain old Peter Parker, when in reality I'm Spider-Man. I could just, like, I don't know, rip his head off, but I can't do it because I have to, maintain my secret identity to protect the people I love. It feels like you're being punished for having this element about your character. But guess what? As a player, in the back of your mind, hell, in the front of your mind, you should be going, oh, I want this to happen. I'm getting rewarded for having to struggle with my obligations and with promises that I have made. This is actually a net gain for me. In fact, if my character isn't struggling with my issues, then I'm actually not going to be winning the game as much as someone who is. So this means that as a player, you are going to operate to create these opportunities. And lastly, you embodied your Eclipse or displayed the contents of your heart. Basically, if you go into Eclipse mode, you played it up, right? You ran with it. You really sold it. Or, you just had a great moment of honest, true emotional clarity. And again, this character sheet's already tightly packed, but look how you're able to fit this stuff in here too. That player agenda that we talked about before, boom. They actually get to put it here on the sheet, on the frickin' character sheet right there. It's there for you to see, to read over and over and over again during the session. There's even rules reminders. What can you do with gather information? How does teamwork work? How do you gain a bonus die? Right? It's fantastic. So very, very, very cool stuff here. Again, some new stuff, but also some classic Forge in the Dark stuff. So let's take a look and let's head back to our core systems. All right. So as we showed on the character sheet, right? These characters have 9 actions. They are confess, forgive, perceive, express, defy, empathize, conceal, flow, and analyze. Now, actions do not tell you what you can do in the game. What actions tell us is when we are talking and we are conversating and we are having a description about what is happening in the game, what are the moments in the game that the game itself cares about? So, for example, if we are forgiving someone, if we are trying to confess to someone, when we're trying to perceive someone, this is where the game interjects and says, I care about these things. And we should, right off the bat, we should see here that, confess, forgive, perceive, express, defy them, right? And what's interesting is these aren't really specific actions, which is why I don't really like that they're called actions. They're more like different approaches to solve a problem, right? Defy can mean a lot of different things, right? And they even say this here in the text. Defying could be you stand up to a bully and you just glare at them, defying them. But it also could mean, right, you unleash your hypersonic nega punch and you smash him down to the ground. So defy isn't really about the actual, it's not like it's the attack action, right? It's more of a methodology or a way to sort of define them. And I like the term, approach. What are you trying to do? A lot of times in Forge in the Dark games, we're just talking, we're having a conversation, and the player will say something, and I will say, okay, I get what you're doing, what you're physically doing or whatever, but what are you trying to accomplish here? What is the goal? What are you hoping comes out of this? So that we can basically understand what is the approach that you're really trying to do here. And that's important. And a classic example of this, for those of you who don't really understand Forge in the Dark, is if I pull out my flintlock gun pistol and I shoot somebody in the kneecap in order to intimidate them, I would not roll my gun skill. okay, I would roll my intimidation skill. Because what I'm trying to do, I'm not trying to hurt this person, right? I'm not trying to kill them. I'm not trying to take them out. I'm trying to intimidate them. Maybe I'm shooting them in the leg or something, or shooting them in the shoulder or the arm or something. I don't know where people can be shot and it's not devastatingly violent. But my point is the approach that I'm taking, what I'm describing in the fiction, that's just fluff. That's just narrative. The goal is I want to intimidate this person into, not going to the cops, not going to the blue coats. So that is what I'm trying to do. When the fiction, I'm pulling out my gun and shooting them. But this wouldn't be a hunting action. This wouldn't be a fighting action because I'm not trying to do that. So again, this tells us a lot about what this game is about. I mean, this game is clearly about understanding yourself, understanding others, and communication. And, so much of this here, confess, forgive, perceive, express, really empathize, conceal, really, really highlight that and approach that. Now we see some stuff that would probably be more, like flow is very clearly the, you want to do something cool and acrobatic and with speed and grace. But, this is why I say you got to call it an approach. You might move with grace to adapt to your circumstances, right? So it might be you leaping across a gap and sliding underneath a closing security door, right? Moments before it closes. Everybody could agree that's flow. But another way that you might work with flow is, your character in their normal version is being dragged to your parents are dragging you to some horrible high socialite ball that you desperately do not want to be to, but you can't draw any attention to yourself. And so you adapt and you pretend, right? And someone could say, well, what are you really doing here? Are you concealing or are you trying to adapt? And again, we'll have that conversation. I want to have that conversation with my players at the table because I think that is so important because I really want to understand what is it that you're trying to do here. And by the way, just classic Forge in the Dark thing where it says, flow, you could use your speed to go toe to toe with a frightening monster, but maybe defy is better, right? There is no right answer. There is no attack skill. There is no attack action, diplomacy action, intimidate action. Any of these approaches could be kind of used for anything. The important thing is that we have a conversation and that as a table, we agree on an approach or an action. So very important. Another bit of Forge in the Dark tech here. We see this very similar. This is to all of our, again, I apologize if you don't know everything about Forge in the Dark games. But your actions are in Blades in the Dark and Scum of Villainy. There's 4 of them, but in this game, there are 3 of them. They are typically grouped into these categories called attributes. And our ability in an attribute is how many dots we have filled in on the first column. So for example, if we had 4 ranks in perceive, but 0 dots in forgive and 0 dots in confess, our moon rating would only be 1. Even though we have 4 points in perceive, we would be 0, 0, 4. Whereas if our character had 1 dot in confess, 1 dot in forgive, 1 dot in perceive, our moon ranking would be 3. This is the game's way of sort of rewarding you for being a little bit more of a generalist and not just piling in on one skill. And by the way, assuming that you use these, this is a little bit of car op meta game knowledge here for your next Forge in the Dark game. Assuming this game uses attribute rolls as resistance rolls, let me tell you something. When you can have all of your attributes be at least a 2, ideally a 3, in Blades in the Dark, it would be a 3. That's a good thing because it means that you'll take less stress when you resist. So just FYI, try not to have a rating, an attribute of 0 or 1 whenever you can. Hey, London coming in with our very first tip of the evening.
London Moonlight tipped $10. Just happy to be talking about this game, smile.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, London, for the tip. Thank you for your efforts in campaigning to get this game on the first look and for running one and now about to run a second Girl by Moonlight campaign on our Knights of Last Call Patreon Discord. So thank you for everything that you do. And praise be to the Elder God, who is now level 80 and 70 or 80, one of the two, and is higher level than me. So in this case, what are these attributes are used for? Well, we have, we've got Sun represents a character's compassion and resolve. Roll Sun when you resist a consequence of violence or fear. So again, this is how the game operates. One of the things that's really important is when you roll dice in Forged in the Dark games, there's a lot of times going to be consequences. It's what makes the game interesting. But as a player, you can always, always, always choose to resist those consequences. And if there are multiple consequences, you could choose to resist them all. It's up to you. When you do this, if you're resisting violence or fear, you roll with your Sun. Let's see what, like, for example, this character has Moon of 2, which is pretty decent. This represents your sincerity and clarity. Roll Moon when you resist a consequence of despair or heartbreak. So this is saying that if something bad happens in the game where somebody is despairing, our heart is breaking, that we can use the Moon stat to resist that. And it means that we basically get to say, no, it didn't happen. I mean, in D&D terms, it's like me, the DM, saying, oh, the dragon comes down and breathes fire and it does 44 points of damage to you, and it destroys your shield, which is consumed in the inferno, right? Those are two consequences. You took 44 damage and your shield was destroyed. In Forged in the Dark, you can say, no, I didn't. And then you explain why that happened, why your character was so cool, why your character was such a badass. It's very empowering. When we roll dice, it's all D6 based. We roll that. An action roll is when we try to accomplish something that is meaningful danger, and something is at stake. So it's either got to be dangerous and risky, or something really needs to be at stake. And ideally, honestly, preferably, I would say both. Ideally, you should really only be making an action roll if something has both risk, aka you can imagine what's going to go wrong, okay, and there is something important on the line. If it's something risky, but we don't really care what happens, it's kind of like, do we really need to roll? But in any case, action rolls are really important because most of the time when you make an action roll, you're probably going to roll a 4 or 5 as your highest dice, which means that you're going to succeed, but there's going to be complications. There's going to be consequences, and that's what keeps the game going. Downtime rolls are when we are not on missions and we can perform in relative safety. Downtime rolls cannot fail, right? They merely just mark how much progress we are making towards accomplishing our goals. This is straight out of Forged in the Dark. A fortune roll is when the GM basically says, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to roll a D6 and leave it up to chance. They call that a fortune roll. Resistance roll. This is really important to Forged in the Dark. If you're not resisting, start resisting. Whenever the characters suffer a consequence that they don't like, you can make a resistance roll. The roll tells us how much stress their character suffers to reduce the severity of the consequence. Now, by the way, it's not a free lunch. If you keep taking a bunch of stress, your character will eventually eclipse. For example, Fawn tries to keep up with Hawk, but she hesitates and misses her chance. Anya, the player, doesn't want her character to be separated, so she rolls Fawn's Sun attribute to resist the consequence and instead describes how they catch up or why they're there or how they didn't get separated. Ooh, this is new. Protagonists will each make this. So this is called the obligation roll. So this is new tech. Protagonists will each make this roll during the obligation phase. Like a resistance roll, obligation rolls tell us how much stress a protagonist accumulates. In this case, the stress comes from the day-to-day struggle of their lives. Brutal. So after you go on a mission and you go into your everyday life, that alone can stress you out, and for no gain. Ooh, that's brutal. Man, hopefully there's some way to hopefully there's some way to get around that. And again, we're not going to get into how Forged in the Dark works and how you make action rolls and all that other stuff. We have done like 2 or 3 videos on position and effect. It's fantastic. It's a great way to, not obviously it's required when you're playing Forged in the Dark, but it's a great way to think about how you run RPGs in general. Position and effect is fantastic, and it's a great way to run the game. But we have controlled, risky, desperate, standard Forged in the Dark nomenclature here, and we have effect. We have limited, standard, great. So the classic standard 3x3 effect matrix, PE matrix, totally good here. Okay. Now, of course, as I said before, when you make an action roll, you're going to be rolling D6s. And ideally, you want to roll, and you take the highest die that you roll. So obviously, if you roll more dice, you have a better chance of getting a 6, or at least a 4 or a 5, which still is success, albeit with a complication. A 6 means you succeed and there is no complication. So getting a 6 is a really great thing. So rolling more dice is better. However, you can gain bonus dice. You can add up to 2 bonus dice to your action roll. A teammate can assist you to provide you with a bonus dice. They take 1 stress. This is normal from Blaze in the Dark. A teammate can spend a stress to give you a bonus die. However, they'll describe in the fiction how they're helping you. Of course, it has to all make sense. But we can also spend a link. So this is new tech for this game, where link, remember from our character sheet example, our characters have this links, which are presumably, the other people in our party. And so it looks like this is a resource that we will build up with them. And we can see here, again, the character sheet is so good, it can actually give us the rules text too. We can grant a +1 dice to an ally's action by spending a link. So we could spend stress, or we could spend the link. We can also push ourselves. This either costs 2 stress. So it costs 2 stress to give yourself 1 die. It only costs an ally 1 stress to give you a die. Or we can accept a poisoned promise, which in Blaze of the Dark is called a devil's bargain. Basically, you can get a bonus dice, but you have to make a Faustian deal, right? You have to make some sort of, devil's bargain, or poison promise. Something bad has to happen, or there has to be some sort of negative consequences, regardless of the outcome of the rule. You pay that price before you even roll the dice. And all the other stuff that you can do normally when you push yourself as well. You can improve your level of effect, you can add a die roll, or you can act despite being at level 3 harm. Basic Forged in the Dark stuff, I'm not going to get too much into this. Here is our classic Devil's Bargain language here. Nothing seems out of the ordinary here. We could suffer harm, we could start or tick a clock, we could introduce troublesome all things that I love to do. And by the way, I'm a big fan of both with consequences and with Devil's Bargain / poison promises, to use my Apocalypse World agenda. Think off screen too. So I'm a big fan of starting and ticking clocks that aren't even in the current mission. It's outside of the context of the game that we're in. What's your high level view on Devil's Bargain? Are you pro con? Exceedingly pro. In fact, I would say that some of the very best clocks, enemies, problems, consequences, whole entire interesting story arcs that have come from the Blaze in the Dark campaigns that I've run, the Scum and Villainy campaign that I ran, have come not from me. They have come from players and their Devil's Bargains. In fact, a lot of times it is the other players, right, suggesting, like a player will say, I want a bonus die, but I don't want to take 2 stress. And they'll say, I'm thinking about taking a Devil's Bargain. I'm thinking about taking a Poison Promise. Does anybody have any good ideas? And before I can even speak, another player chimes in and says, what if blah, 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 blah. And everyone's like, oh yeah, that's awesome. And the player will go, that seems horrible and awful. Absolutely. Yes, let's take it. And so I have found them to be a veritable gold mine of activity. And again, a Devil's Bargain is something the player chooses. So they feel empowered. Even if it's awful, they get to decide whether they want that or not. And so when they take them, I think it's great. Sometimes it feels like a lot of time at the table just for a +1 die, but when it feels right, it feels great. Yeah, I mean, to me, Derek, yes, if people are probably doing this literally on every roll, I imagine that could get tiresome. One would hopefully think that eventually the players will become so spun out by troubles that they would stop doing that. But I find that it doesn't it doesn't always have to be a ton of time at the table. Sometimes someone has a great idea. And I'll be honest with you, Derek. Sometimes somebody will have a great idea. It'll take our campaign in a whole new direction. A lot of times I'll just tick a clock. It might not even necessarily make sense. You know, I just go, the rival gang gets one step closer to finding your secret hideout. You agree? Okay, we agree. Take your +1 die. Moving on. Right? So it's just, sometimes I'll be like, you know what? You're really stressing yourself. You know, this is really tough for you. Take level 1 harm. You know, you're winded. Okay, cool. Take level 1 harm, winded. Right? It's just sometimes if it doesn't feel like it's a big story moment, if it doesn't feel like it's a big action roll, maybe you shouldn't be rolling anyways, but even when you are rolling, right, there's really big rolls and then there's not so big rolls. Just feel free to just tick a clock or mark some harm or, you know, just make it really, really simple. If a player is taking Devil's Bargain, what they're really saying is, I want the bonus die, I want to succeed here, but I'm running out of stress and I don't want to run out of stress, or I don't want to eclipse. And so, you know, read the table, right? Read the moment. If it's a big moment, maybe now is the time to introduce that the other person that they're facing off against is their long lost brother. Great, awesome, cool. But we're clearly not going to do that every time. And if it's just some random NPC that is just, you know, on the street that they're running away from, you know, it probably isn't appropriate. But if it's a good moment for it, you know, then that's you know, what we go with. Anon says, I hate when clocks are ticked based on incongruent results. It's not always the most elegant thing, Anon, but you have to understand that there is a big, in my opinion, there is a big divorce. Action rolls, the dice rolls, the consequences, they are gamist considerations that exist outside of the fiction. They are not simulationist, in my personal opinion. They are not simulationist at all. And so I view the action rolls not as some sort of physics generator, and the consequences that come out of that have to be directly tied one-to-one to the action that we just took. This is a drama engine. It is generating narrative outcomes. And I therefore feel very empowered to just simply say, the situation for you all just got a little bit worse. You know, the heat just got turned up. The situation got a little bit more dire, out of the frying pan into the fire. It doesn't necessarily have to do with anything about the fact that you were picking the lock. I have a whole videos on this, so I'm not going to get into it too much. But anyways, very cool, basic stuff here. Again, harm level 6 success, teamwork, all good stuff. Group actions are like the single greatest thing ever in Forge in the Dark. I use them all the time, and I wish other games had as elegant of a good group action role as Blades in the Dark / Forge in the Dark / Girl by Moonlight do. Setup, also great. The teamwork rules in Forge in the Dark games are like sublime. They're so good. All right, so this is new. I mean, look, this is the last thing I'll say on the topic. If there's an obvious complication that makes total sense and it completely fits the fiction, then yeah, go with that. But sometimes there's not. And rather than beat yourself over the head or create some really wonky, weird, incongruent thing, just tick a clock. That's all I'm saying. And I will promise you, your games will be easier and better, and you'll have more fun running the game because you won't feel the same weird pressure to constantly be creating entire new worlds every dice roll that somebody makes. All right, so Transcendence. This is a new thing. This is new tech. In order to stand against the various threats the protagonists face, they will need to transcend. Each playset will have variations on what it means to transcend, but at its core, it's always the same. Transcendence means embodying your truest self. It is an exultant expression of everything that your characters are forced to bury and deny about themselves in their day-to-day lives. See, that's like me, right? By day, I am a humble data scientist forced to learn how to use Google Cloud Platform as we switch over to yet another platform. But by night, I am Derek of Knights of Cast Call, and I am exultant in my expression of my ability to review RPGs. All right. You can activate your Transcendence once per mission. You can transcend at any time before making an action roll, in response to a consequence, or any other time it makes sense. The details of the series will answer these questions. When you transcend, you describe your character's transformation, your look, your body, your gender. They may all shift. What does it look like? How does it feel? What does it feel like when the power is spent? When Fawn transcends, she adopts a heroic alter ego, the Midnight Quill, a dashing scoundrel who works from the shadows to secretly aid her friends. Midnight Quill wears a mask that hides her identity, and her friends, or at least Hawk, suspect that she is in league with the adversary, mistaking her efforts to help them as meddlesome interference. All right. While transcended, you gain access to the following: Transcendent special abilities from their playbook and the series playset. Interesting. So the series playset itself will give us special abilities. We get access to use of our armor, which is a way that you can resist consequences without taking stress. We get our transcendent action ratings, the 3rd and 4th dots, if we have any of them. So as a reminder, I said, oh, you probably only get to access these if you are in your transcendent form. So we can see down here our armor box. So we only get access to that if we're transcended. And it looks like we can only get access to these abilities when we are transcended. Okay. So, for example, if we are the Enigma, we get access to these 3 abilities when we are transcended. We can do the big reveal. We can watch this. Perform a superhuman feat of athletics. Or deliver a monologue without anyone interrupting you. So this is whenever you push yourself, you could choose one of the following additional benefits. And then powerful friends. Once per mission, you may flash back to a special downtime. So the game apparently has flashbacks. Maybe it doesn't have flashbacks. I didn't see them mention flashbacks otherwise, but this gives you the ability to flashback. Once per mission, you may flash back to a special downtime action taken as your transcendent self. Shift the results of the roll up 1 step. Interesting. Okay. So we get our transcendent action rating, and we get increased effect against supernatural opposition. We can perform magical feats and superhuman abilities. Some of these abilities are theirs alone. Others are shared abilities of the group's origin. That's the series books. Notably, when we are not transcended, the characters do not necessarily have effect level to match a supernatural threat in the world, right? We don't have potency, basically. And our position and effect may be very greatly compromised, you know, when the kaiju attacks and we're just, you know, people running around in our, you know, pilot jumpsuits. You know, the GM is probably rightfully to say, you know, oh, this is your effect is desperate none or, you know, desperate limited. But then when we are transcended and we are in our mech, maybe then we have, you know, risky standard. Each protagonist has a transcendent track in their playbook. Right. We saw that. Right. So this is this transcendent track that we saw. We've got right here. We've got four marks. Every action roll made while transcended advances the track by 1 segment. Okay, so we only get to do this 4 times. This includes group actions and any action rolls made in flashbacks. Apparently, we can't make flashbacks. Once the last segment of the track is filled, our transcendence ends. Interesting. So we can only transcend once per mission. And then once we are transcended, we get access to our special abilities, our heightened action rolls, increased position and effect through the fiction. But we can only make 4 action rolls. If we are able to accomplish all that we need to with the transcendent actions they have, the transcendence ending might be a relief, a moment of calm. But however, if we run out while still in the midst of a mission, we might end up bereft of our power when we need it the most. Interesting. I don't really know the Magic Girl genre this well, but this seems like this seems interesting to me. I wouldn't expect this. This resets when we complete a mission, unless we are in Eclipse or ineligible due to the rules of our series. Okay, so basically, when you transcend, you're setting a timer. You only have 4 action rolls left before you're back to your ordinary self. So, kind of a cool strategic decision about when to make that. All right, so links are the connections that we make from the power of our relationships, and we create them through the make a connection downtime action. This sounds very similar to bonds from Fabula Ultima, and sort of when you have your camping phase and you can use them to increase a bond with your fellow players. But when we are in our downtime, normally we are healing, we are advancing our crew, we are advancing a long-term project, but now we can also make a connection. And we can use that downtime to basically show that, hey, your character and my character, we spent the afternoon, we went shopping together, and, we bonded and we became better friends, and we can mark the link. The character's connections, despite the weight of the obligations of an oppressive day-to-day routine, are an important part of what make them heroic. So this becomes, and it does say, by the way, though, certain character playbooks or series can have other ways of adding links, not just through downtime actions. So again, this is, pretty mechanically simple, but fundamentally it's an interesting idea to sort of reward the characters in downtime. Normally we would just say it's FBT to just sit there and describe how your characters hung out together, played video games or whatever. But in this game, there's a mechanical consequence to that, which is you might be making a connection and building up your link. Links are shared between your character and another character and are divided into pools. All unspent links are lost at the end of each episode. Okay. So you got to use them or lose them. To use a link, spend a link with a character. To use a link, spend a link with a character and choose one of the effects. So here's what we can do. By the way, anytime we do this, we have to describe how the relationship is a source of strength. So we can spend a link to recover 2 stress. Now, as far as I can tell, this is another interesting mechanical touch point. In Blades in the Dark and Scum and Villainy and Band of Blades, the way that you recover stress is through vices. The idea is that your characters are fairly flawed. And, the vice doesn't necessarily have to be something horrible, but it's probably not good for you. Excessive gambling, excessive drinking, that type of thing. But the point is, a vice is a way for your character to recover stress between missions, and it uses up your downtime actions. We had a really cool vice when we played Scum and Villainy. Aaron's character was I think he was like an ex-colonial, like he had been dishonorably discharged from the Navy. And in Scum and Villainy, you're in this sort of backwater star system far away from the Imperial core. And for whatever reason, I can't remember the exact details, but Aaron's character was basically like in exile. He had been sort of banished to the outer realm, but he was forced to leave behind his daughter, his young daughter. And so Aaron's vice was him basically like making a connection like a phone call, basically, almost like that scene from Interstellar, right, where Matthew McConaughey's character is like watching the video messages from his children. And it's like for Aaron, like the way that he recovered stress was by rekindling that connection. So clearly not as much of a vice, but we said it was a vice because it was dangerous for him and he wasn't supposed to be doing it. So anyways, point is, even something like recovering stress can be a great source of role playing if you have good players. Just saying. Anyways, so in this game, I don't see that we have vices. Instead, we build links with our fellow players, and then we can spend those links to recover stress. And this can affect us or them at our option. So it's through each other that we get over our stress. And I think that's a really cool touch. Remember, like I said, what gets rewarded gets repeated, right? What gets measured gets managed. So this game is all about interpersonal connections, but it's also a game. It's a game. It's got, knobs and dials and widgets, and stress is a real thing. And it's a character resource. It's basically the game's hit points. And when you play a game with hit points, you want to know, how do I heal? Here's how you heal. You build links with your fellow protagonists and spend them at appropriate times to recover stress. Fantastic. We can also spend a link with a transcendent ally to allow them to ignore the effects of a single harm tag. It doesn't make the harm go away. It just allows them to ignore it. We already saw this one. We can help somebody without spending stress. And if somebody rolls a 4 or a 5 result on an Eclipse roll, you may spend 1 link with them to prevent them from falling into Eclipse. Okay, so you can keep them from going over the abyss. So these are all the things that we want in this game, right? We want to recover stress. We want to be able to ignore harm. We want to be able to get bonus dice. We want to avoid going into Eclipse. I mean, this is everything we want to do in this game. And it's all done through the link mechanic, which is all done through forging and connecting bonds with the fellow players. So this is just a fantastic blending of mechanics and fiction. It reinforces all of the things that the game says it's trying to do. So A+. Yeah, we can see here. Hymna just reached 9 stress due to a bad resistance roll. Don't I know it? You know, you're like, oh, it's good. I've got 2 dice. What am I going to take? You know, maybe I'll only take 1 stress. You roll like a 1 and a 1, and you like take 5, and you're like, what the fuck? Anyways, which prompts Claire to have to make an Eclipse roll. She gets a 4. Dylan looks at his sheet and sees that Van has a link with Hymna. So Dylan spends it to prevent Hymna from falling into Eclipse. Van begins to hear Hymna panicking and reassures her over the radio. Don't give up. I'm with you. I got your back. And that keeps them from going into Eclipse. Great stuff. Mechanically, you're just rolling a dice, but that's why we play role-playing games, because it's mechanics with a little bit of fun and flavor slathered on top. I personally believe that is the core essence of what a role-playing game is. I think if you take one or the other away, yes, I think if you have mechanics without role-playing, you're playing a board game. And if you have role-playing without mechanics, I don't think that's a role-playing game either. So come at me. I think you need both. Anyways. So we've talked a lot about stress. We've talked a lot about Eclipse. So whenever this is our stress track, and whenever we reach the limit of our stress track, we potentially go into this Eclipse where our inner turmoil and self-destruction come again. This is very shades of Darkest Self from Monster Hearts. Fantastic, which I love. And again, it's also a great way to show sort of the what our character could have been, or the dark side of our character. It's a nice freeing moment, you know. It's kind of like the permission to sort of be the asshole, selfish player, but you could be like, look, it's not me, it's the game. It's sorry, the mechanics are making me act this way. All right. Whenever you reach or exceed your stress limit, you roll for Eclipse using your lowest attribute. So this is interesting because that's very similar to like when you indulge with a vice, you roll with your lowest attribute. So it's kind of, it's like using existing mechanics from Forge in the Dark, but repurposing them for a different way. So I appreciate the nice little mechanical nuance there. In other words, you use what you're weakest at in order to avoid going into Eclipse, which is beautiful. While at your stress limit and not in Eclipse, any additional stress you would take, instead, you just trigger this Eclipse roll. If you roll a 6, you stay in the struggle. If you roll a 4 or 5, you fall into Eclipse, unless someone else in your party can keep you from doing that by spending a link. And if you roll a 1, 2, or 3, you are in Eclipse. If you roll a critical success, you get to erase a segment of your Transcendence. You recover 5 stress. You basically have a breakthrough moment. It's like a moment of clarity where you push past your darkest self and find a new purpose and renewed moment. This would be a big moment at the game table, and I would definitely want to spend a couple of minutes exploring what happened. What breakthrough did your character just have, which I think would be really cool to do. When you fall into Eclipse, read the prompt out loud, including the escape clause. This will help everyone at the table to understand your sudden shift in behavior, right? This is the I'm allowed to act like an asshole warning, and it's not my fault, it's the game's fault, but also remind them how they can help you escape your character. So real quick, I do want to shoot over. So we had looked at the Enigma, right? We become a selfish, self-absorbed diva. And if we reveal our secret identity, we escape it. But let's take a look at another playbook. So we have, the Time Traveler. All right, here we go. The Stranger. All right. When you Eclipse, there's no more wasting time with friends or feelings. They just get in the way. It's time to focus on something real and tangible, something that makes sense. You find a concrete, rational, and entirely impossible task to pursue to the exclusion of all else. We escape our eclipse when someone works alongside you on your task without judgment, and you let the task go incomplete and unresolved. Very cool. So you can see each of these is very different in what kind of gameplay pattern this is going to sort of bring to the table. By the way, you can see here too, while the last three, expressing your beliefs or drive, struggling with your issues, embodying your eclipse, right? While these are all the same, the first one is always different. You addressed a challenge with, instead of mystery or flair, which is what we saw for the mask, here it is knowledge or subtlety, you know. I should also note, by the way, that if I go into my eclipse phase through my stress, you might think, oh, okay, so another player is going to like jump in right away and start working alongside of me so that I can get out of this eclipse phase. Maybe not. I might, as a player, tell you as a player, hey, hold off there. Why? Because I want to embody my eclipse. I want to get some of that sweet, sweet XP by getting to play to my eclipse. In fact, if I can keep this eclipse thing going and it can create this really cool moment, and it comes up a bunch throughout the course of this episode, I get to mark 2 XP. And so, yeah, you're metagaming, but the game is rewarding you for this. It's basically saying, hey, listen, just because you're in your eclipse phase doesn't mean that you need to necessarily immediately escape it, you know? Which I think is really, really important. All right. So when in eclipse, we're assholes. We can be eclipsed through all phases of play. Oh, interesting. While you are in eclipse, you use stress in reverse, erasing accumulated stress on your sheet anytime you would normally take it. You do not clear stress or your transcendence track at the end of a mission. If an effect causes you to recover stress, you instead gain stress. Being in eclipse gives you power. This is very shades of Avatar, right? Where if you are pushed to the ends of your balance track, you are out of balance, but you can use that to actually be very effective and very powerful due to the way the moves work. This allows you to accuse your accumulated stress a second time. This power comes at a cost. However, as in this state, your character's dysfunctional impulses start to overshadow their virtue. It also brings risk. If your stress ever reaches 0 while you are in eclipse, choose one of the following for your character. You could take no more and you die. You lose your magical powers and return heartbroken to your completely mundane life, or you betray your companions and side with the adversaries. So this is really, really cool. So like you build up the stress, you go into your sort of dark form, your sort of dark side moment. And now that same stress becomes a resource. But if you overspend it, right, then you can literally die, right? Or potentially, essentially, for all intents and purposes, you could be removed from the campaign. Very, very, very interesting. Very cool. And it also puts, anytime you would use stress, you erase accumulated stress. So it could happen randomly. Like you could resist something and roll weird and gain a bunch of stress, which means you lose a bunch of stress, which means you go to 0 and you lose your character. Very interesting. That's a very cool mechanic. I'm trying to think how that would play out at the game. It's kind of right. It's the idea that, it's shades of Star Wars, right? Dark side versus light side. Giving into the dark side can oftentimes be a route to power. It can allow you to accomplish things that you may not have been able to accomplish when you were holding back. So it's very, very interesting and another great way to remove stress. So there's almost, there's a mechanical reason to want to go into Eclipse there again, because you can use it to burn off all the stress that you just accumulated at the cost of being an asshole. And again, we can escape Eclipse with the help of our friends. If we are in downtime when this happens, erase any remaining stress and clear your transcendence track. If we do it during a mission, they stay in place. So ideally, you would want to maybe escape your Eclipse in downtime, because then you get to reset your transcendence track and you get to reset your stress track, but just in case. We've talked about consequences before. These are standard Forge in the Dark mechanics. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. These are reduced effect, complication, lost opportunity, worst position, harm. These are all the standard consequences of Blades in the Dark, Forge in the Dark games. We got complications. We've got harm. We've got recovery. We've talked about resisting. You make a roll and you suffer 6 minus the result. So again, if the highest roll that you get was a 5 on your D6, then you would suffer 1 stress in order to resist the consequence. And by the way, remember, any of these things could be consequence. A lot of people think of consequences and they think of harm. But remember, any of these things that result from an action roll is a consequence, including complications that might be happening off screen, right? Or losing an opportunity. Your character can resist that consequence too. It's pretty powerful. And yes, if someone would take a consequence and it makes sense in the fiction, you can take that consequence for them and then resist. Again, the teamwork rules are great in Forge in the Dark games. If we are transcended, we have armor against physical harm. We can mark this armor to avoid or reduce an appropriate consequence. It could be very literal armor. It could also be energy fields or whatever, just like Blades in the Dark. And some playbooks will have access to special armor, which can be used to absorb or reduce or negate certain types of consequences. Maybe a social consequence or maybe energy consequences. If we suffer level 4 harm and we do not resist it, we die. Same as Forge in the Dark games. If we go to stress 0 stress while in Eclipse, we die. And we can also die if basically it makes complete sense in the fiction and we don't have to make a die roll. Telegraph this as far advanced as possible and give every player every opportunity to buy out. If they walk out knowingly, so be it. Yeah. Again, always don't play the gotcha game. Let your players know what's up. Make a new character if our character dies. Thanks. I would hope so. Clocks. We've talked about clocks ad infinitum on this channel, but they're great. They're awesome, and you should use them. I like to put them on an index card with a big Sharpie, throw them out into the middle of my table that I'm playing at, and let my players see them. Let the doom, let the threat be right in their ever-present face. Oh, interesting. I think I like this gather information roll better than I like Blades in the Dark's roll. So in Blades in the Dark, gather information is a form of fortune roll, which basically means, it does say this. This is typically a fortune roll. But if you're in something where this, could be dangerous or in the middle of a mission or something, you're under fire and you're trying to access a computer to get information, it could be an action roll. But most of the time it's a fortune roll because there's no consequence. You're just figuring stuff out. In Blades in the Dark, you make a fortune roll, and if you roll a 1, 2, or 3, you get limited information. And if you roll a 4 or 5, you get okay information. And if you roll a 6, you get particularly good information. I kind of like this better. I like the idea of if you get a 1 to 3, you get to ask 1 question. If you get a 4 or 5, 1 question and a follow-up question. And on a 6, you get to ask 2 questions and a follow-up question. I think I'll be stealing this for Blades in the Dark or Scum and Villainy or whatever Forge in the Dark game I play. I like this better. It's more direct, it's more concrete, and it basically, it lets the players know, hey, you get to ask me 2 questions. What are they? You get to ask 1 question, and then whatever I say, you get to ask a follow-up question. And then that's it. End of story, and on to the next one. That's really, really cool. The questions are unique to each playbook. Ew. I got it. That is awesome. So I love this. I mean, it's a great way to make each character distinct and unique. And, if we are playing the stranger, we can ask these questions, right? And then again, we say what honesty demands, right? We don't really figure out why my character knows these things. We just get to know them. But what is the purpose of X? What might happen if I X? What here is isolated or alone? But what if we look at the Harmony playbook? The Harmony playbook is, who here can best help me? What are you really feeling? How are X and Y connected? Who here feels alone? What here is incomplete? Oh, this is beautiful, brilliant. Unfortunately, I can't really steal that without doing a lot of legwork. I still probably would steal this just anyways because I think it's really good. But having the question specific to the playbook is A+ design for me. I love it. So big fan of that. Each playbook has a different set of questions. Interesting. Very, very cool. Love this. All right. So we've talked about the phases of play and how most of them seem very similar to our standard Forge in the Dark game, which is downtime, missions, aka scores, and fallout, aka payoff, heat. What's that? Payoff, heat, and is it called complications? No, what's it called? Payoff, heat. What comes after heat? I can't. I'm blanking here completely. It's not called complications. I don't know. Someone will tell me in chat. But this obligation is a new thing. Normally, we would have free play and our criminals just to go get to have fun and role play and talk to each other and figure out what our next heist is. Instead, basically, we've got to go to our 9 to 5, and it sucks. So in the obligation phase, we see the protagonists face their day-to-day entanglements. Thank you, Andrew. That is correct. Entanglements. Payoff, heat, entanglements. In the obligation, we see the protagonists in their day-to-day lives. And this is a great moment because, I mean, we'll see. In my sense, this is sort of like, we'll see here. In my sense, it's like more like a montage of your characters. What was my character's week like, right? What was my character's day like? The nature of these obligations will vary by series, but they are always a source of stress. When you roll obligation, roll your lowest attribute, and you take stress equal to 6 minus the die result. Okay. On a critical success, we get an additional downtime action. That's pretty cool. For any result, we narrate what this means for the characters. This might mean some dialogue or moments of in-character play, or you might just choose to narrate what happens to the characters. Use this attribute rolled as a guide for ways in which the obligation affects your character. So yeah, I'm just imagining like, right. If the moon is rolled, the obligation breaks your heart and drives you to despair, right? And you just narrate like, your character sitting there at the dining room table eating their dinner while your parents are screaming at each other and your little brother is just ignoring it and is just like, face down in his phone, and you're just miserable and you're hating everything about your life, right? And you're dying and your heart's breaking inside, right? And you just describe this moment to the players like, this is what it means. Like for me, my obligation is I've got to be a member of my family. Right. And maybe you rolled really shitty and you got a lot of stress. And so you get to showcase this, like, this moment of stress and anxiety and heartbreak for your character. And then boom, we go back into the narrative. And, it could be a moment to role play, between characters. But in my mind, this is a kind of a quicker moment in the game that really just sets the tone and the stakes for, what's to come. I like this a lot. Director, this is a place to follow through on your principle, to gaze into the broken mirror of the everyday world. Okay, right. Basically, there's one of the GM agendas is like in Monster Hearts is make the monsters seem human, make the humans seem monstrous, right? And the idea is that like it's not, the werewolf is not nearly the monster that the child abusing stepfather is, right? Like that's the real monster. And then it's oftentimes the humans that are the real threat, right? The real monsters. There's a kind of like that turn of phrase there. So, again, I like this idea here. And again, I like that. Again, it could be a moment of in-character play, but it could also be just a narration, a montage, that just a day in the life, right? A slice of that person's life, and you get to see it. Downtime. How many downtime actions do we get? We get 2, just like Forge in the Dark. And just like Forge in the Dark, we can use them to advance projects. And based on the roll, we advance a certain number of segments. Very similar. But we do get this make a connection. When you make a connection, choose another protagonist and describe something the two of you do together. If it's something the other character would appreciate, their player can offer you an extra die. Roll an appropriate action. The chosen character gains the result level as links with you. So you give links to them with your downtime action. If you get a critical success, you also gain a link. Interesting. And you can only make a connection with a given character once per downtime. So you could do it with 2 different characters, but you can't do it with the same character twice. Isaiah says, no easy way out, because in Blaze of the Dark, let me tell you, Blaze of the Dark, a lot of my players would spend coin to get extra downtime actions or rep often. Not so much rep, but coin. A lot of times coin got spent for downtime actions. Interesting. And again, we talked about how important these connections are. Links are very powerful. They again, provide a currency to basically do all the things that you want to do in a Forge in the Dark game mechanically. So there's a strong reason. Again, this is downtime. I always say, in downtime, I want to elid time, right? I view it as a montage sequence. I really do. I don't like to spend too much time in downtime when I'm running a Blaze in the Dark game. I'm fine to concentrate for a few brief moments. We describe this, and like this thing here, this is how I would want this to be. This is literally, for me personally, how I would want this to play out at the table. The player playing Raven goes, I'm going to skip curfew to meet my friend Fawn at an underground dance hall. We describe we're sneaking out. I'm not describing anything more than this. I'm like, okay, we're sneaking out. I'm running to your window. I'm throwing some rocks up. You flip it open your thing. You look around. You crawl out on the rope full of sheets. And it's like, and the 2 players are just going back and forth. We go to the hall. We're there at the music, and and I go, I'm so nervous about being here. I don't offer you the extra die, and we roll defy because we're not supposed to be here, and then we roll the die and we're done. And I smile, even though I'm nervous to be here. And that's it. End the scene. Like that to me is like perfect. Like it shouldn't take, for me personally, more than like 2 minutes. And let's go to the next person's downtime action. And let's just keep it moving, people. Keep it moving. Everybody just wants to chew these scenes so much. And it's like, listen, learn to be a good editor of yourself, of the table, of the game. All right. You can help a friend recover. You can advance their recovery chart result according to their result. Although I do like that there, I use different recovery rules because I just feel like the clock is just unnecessary. But I do like that they have here completing the recovery clock removes all level 1 harm, and all other harm is reduced by 1 level. But you still have to complete the clock, and that's the one thing I don't like. For me, by the way, the way I do is when you recover, I just have that happen automatically. I have all level 1 harm becomes no harm, level 2s become 1, and level 3 becomes 2. And that's what you get for 1 action. That's how I deal it. I don't want to risk it with the dice rolls. And, I get it. There's, in Scum and Villainy, there's the doctor, role, which specifically references that. And you know what, I'll just make some house rule up or something like that. I just don't like harm clock. It's just me personally. And we have our longtime project. Of course we do, because this is one of the best parts of Forge in the Dark games, period. If you're not doing this, if you're not using this, this is a way that players can be proactive. This is the way that they can make the world their own. And it's probably one of the coolest, best parts of the entire game system. I've gone on about it in the past. I'm not going to do it again. You can also tend your time to investigate, which lets you advance the investigation track in the series playset. Interesting. So this ties back. We haven't really looked at this yet. This ties into these series playsets. So it looks like, oh, there's a lot more here than I thought. I don't want to give any spoiler alerts. So, interesting. Okay. There's more here than I'm giving it credit. So apparently, basically, we can try to work to solve sort of the grand mystery of our campaign, as well as acting as a gather information role. Very cool. Missions. This is where we go to thing. We have an engagement role. We cut to the action, the heart of the matter, and the mission go to Fallout. Perfect. Again, well, I'm not going to go into details about this. It's brilliant and beautiful. You should definitely use it. We have flashbacks. Great. 0 stress, 1 stress, 3 stress, right? So it's going to be between 0 and 3 stress. Flashbacks are also cool. Again, I don't want to get into the detail of it, but they're a great system. All right, in our Fallout phase, we see the consequences of the group's mission. Their adversary begins to close in on them, seeking to snuff out the opposition that they represent. Other complications and consequences arrive following the group's efforts. In this phase, the director will advance the adversary track and make a Fallout roll to generate new troubles. This marks the end of an episode and a launching point for the events of the next episode. Perfect. So this is how we end the episode / session. Just as the protagonists seek the truth of their adversary, it is always the adversary is always hunting for those that would oppose it. This is represented by the Abyss, the Blight, the Leviathan, and the Conspiracy tracks on the Playbooks. So it's almost like the GM's kind of personal playbook where you advance the adversary track. This is very similar to the Wild Sea. I can't remember what they called it in the Wild Sea, but like the consequence track or something like that, the complication track. Very cool. And it resets it every season. And then we make a Fallout roll to see what bad thing happens. Does an enemy act against us? Or if we're in the end game, right, the Abyss advances its agenda. One of our close friends and allies succumbs to the darkness of the Abyss, right? Very cool stuff. Dramatic stuff, narrative stuff. We've talked about gaining XP a lot, and I'm a big fan of it. Along with the individual characters, there's also series XP. So in normal Blades in the Dark, you have your crew, which can gain experience point. But instead, in this game, the actual series advances. So this basically is like your crew sheet. Very interesting. So we can see here, if we're playing in a Sea of Stars, that's the mecha one. We can see here that as we gain advances, these are abilities that we can take. And these are very similar to crew advancements from Blades in the Dark. But this lets us, as a group, decide we want this ability, or we want this ability, or we want this ability. And I got to be honest with you, yet another reason that Forged in the Dark games are really great is because there is something that is very powerful and magical. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I think role-playing games, I know a lot of people play them because they want to embody this single character. But I think there's a certain weakness and selfishness with that. And I think the game becomes a lot more interesting when you start thinking about the whole, right? When you think about the crew, the party, the group as that's your character. I think that's very, very powerful. And there's a lot of, there's even a certain sense of that in the origins of the hobby, where player characters in D&D came and went. It was the party that made its advancements, right? The party went on. And like, yeah, sure, your rogue died trying to pick a lock or, failed to disarm a trap, but the rest of the party survived, and your new character will join that. And you aren't making a new character. You're just rejoining the party that you just left with a new character. I have not talked about terrible Terry Tate. I have not, but let me just say, just because I'm in the kitchen doesn't mean I'm out of lunch. I'm out to lunch. I came to play, baby. We were talking about this on the Patreon Discord. Anyways, very cool stuff from the series. And then the rest of the book talks about all the ways that the series works together. And I'm not going to probably get a chance to look into that, but let's see what our playbooks are. We've looked at these a little bit, but I do want to look at this while we have a few minutes left. So the Enigma is if you want to be the mysterious ally and the dramatic hero, literally tuxedo mask. Okay. The Guardian is a vigilant protector and patient healer. If you want to be, queen good guy. The Harmony is two voices speaking as one, a beacon of hope. You want to be, the warlord, the bard. The Outsider, a renegade with a troubled past and something to prove. All right, you want to be the emo warlock. Got it. The Stranger, cold and distant luminary, good at calm evaluation and unconventional approaches. Play the Stranger if you want to know how things work. It's kind of wizardy. The Time Traveler, a secretive oracle and dedicated friend. I have no comparison to this, but they're very good at using flashbacks, which is awesome. I got to check that out. That is so cool. Let me see this here. That's such a good idea. All right. Here we go. So, all right. When you use your impossible knowledge to persuade someone, you gain +1 effect level. If a fate you warned of comes to pass, mark XP. Nice. Saw it coming. You can expend your special armor to resist any consequence relating to surprise or misfortune, to be in 2 places at once, or perform some similar feat of time manipulation. Awesome. Oracle. You can perceive, that's that action, the myriad timelines leading from past to future. When you gather info, gain +1 effect level. If it relates to your fated person, take a die as well. My very best friend. When you connect with your fated person, gain +1 die. When they connect with you, mark +1 link. You are outside the regular flow of time and injuries fade from you quickly. Permanently fill 1 segment of your recovery clock. And rewind, return. You have been through this timeline at least once before. Flashbacks cost 1 less stress than normal. How did this go wrong the first time? How is this not just like automatically what you would take immediately? Like this is why I would want to be a time traveler. This is the ability that I wanted to see here. And this is perfect. It's simple. It's to the point. Boom. 1 less stress. So the basic normal flashback of 1 cost me 0. And if I really want to pull something out of my ass and the GM says 2 or 3, it's only 1 or 2. That's beautiful. That's exactly what I want. And then if we are transcended, although I wonder what a transcended time stopper or time traveler would be. If there's ever a question of who acts first, it's you. Once permission, when a director advances a clock, you may say no, and the clock does not advance. That's awesome. You could trade places with your fated person. You briefly remove them from the flow of time. Or once per transcendence, when an ally suffers severe consequences, you can choose to abandon this timeline for a better one. Consequences they would have suffered are replaced by you suffering level 3 harm. Traveler's despair. Your relationship to the person you save is different in this timeline. They will tell you how. Awesome. Amazing. It's fantastic. A lot of times what you're doing here is you're basically creating mechanical ways to reinforce tropes that we all want to do anyways, right? This is where your fated person is, this woman, and you finally are building a relationship with them, and they're starting to fall in love with you, and then boom, they suffer severe consequences. They die or something horrible happens to them, and you choose to basically abandon this timeline so that you can go back into a different timeline and change things so that that doesn't happen to them. But in this timeline, maybe they don't even like you. They kind of hate your guts, and you suffer level 3 harm, traveler's despair, because you knew what could have been and what you were building towards, and now you've sort of had been forced to sort of reset and have to live with these consequences. Perfect. Peter Quill and Gamora, A+, great example, fantastic. That is a fantastic example. And then the unlikely hero. You're good at making friends and getting in over their head. Play the unlikely hero if you want to be the heart of the group. It's like playing the mortal in Monster Hearts. Very cool. So, yeah. And again, we're not going to get a chance to go through all the series, but there is a lot of really cool information here. And again, you're going to be doing this, collaboratively. When we're sitting down, right? Like, we as a group are going to decide, what is the abyss mean, right? Is it endless hunger? Is it a grand cosmic order? Is it a twisted reflection of reality? Why is it doing what it's doing? What are the harbingers of this demise? What is this mundane world that we're playing in? Are we in an ancient city, or is it a futuristic megacity, right? Is it Akira, or are we, in Rome, right? There's a lot of different ways that you could do it. And this is very similar to, palette building from Microscope. And so that's really, really, really cool. And then in this world of the brink of the abyss, what role do we play? Each person chooses 1 or 2, and then choose a playbook that reflects those roles. So, this is basically saying these are the character archetypes. These are the tropes that we want to see in this, world, right? Royal heir, loyal knight, secret lover, demanding mentor, lowly servant, enemy turned friend, fledgling mystic. And when you look at the abyss, endless hunger, twisted reflection, to rule and glory. This is basically the Final Fantasy series. Right? This is basically Final Fantasy in a nutshell. And most of what, the kind of basic play structure of it. And so we can see that they're represented by this. And this is the advancement of the Abyss as it gets closer and closer to its agenda. And then we, as groups, we get these cool powers and abilities that we can choose. Redemption. When determining dice for your engagement roll, if you answer yes to, is this mission particularly noble or heroic, we all clear 1 stress. And if we rescue or an innocent or redeem an enemy, we mark series XP. Great. This is rewarding us and encouraging us to do the things that we want to do anyways. And it's fantastic. So very, very good. And as an example, these are where we talk about how this particular series has these different rules, and there's different shrines, I guess. It's very okay. Yeah, this is just unique to this, I guess. And we get a little bit of like a crew chart. We get a little bit of a turf chart. That's pretty cool. I love the crew sheets I love the crew sheets, and I love the ship sheets. I bet you the mech one is like a ship. Yeah, look at that. Awesome. Right? So, it's such a fantastic way to like bring the group together, is to build and collaboratively, not just the campaign, but to have this sort of character, this mutual character that you share amongst your group. Really, really cool. Because somebody might be like, hey, we should get the mess hall, because like that's where all the best scenes are made, right? We get bonuses to make connections. And someone's like, well, yeah, but I love the idea of, taking a training facility so that we can all get a bunch of XP in our sun. It's fantastic. Someone said, look at the Maze of Dreams one, right? A little bit more complicated. I would probably say this one's a little bit more complicated, but you're like unraveling you're unraveling the truth of Pepe Sylvia, right? Very, very cool. And then, as always, a fantastic rules reference. This is classic Forged in the Dark 101, John Harper, graphic design, explaining everything in the game, all position, all effects. What do your actions do? How does teamwork work? How does links work? And how does the resistance roll work? Pretty much everything that you need outside of specific, wonky game actions. And it's great because it's very intuitive and very easy, and it works really well. So I would say, overall, that this is a very, very good Forged in the Dark game, because I think it is very clear about what it wants to do, and it is beating you over the head with mechanics to support and reinforce those tropes. The game is very clearly set up to tell these kinds of stories, and it is very, very, very clear that it will reward you, not just with things like experience points at the end of session, but the idea that if there's the more the strategic resources like XP, but you want to build friendship because you want to clear stress. You want to stay in your Eclipse form because you want to burn that stress off and use it to empower your abilities while you're in transcendent form. So like that to me is really cool. Even little things like if you leave your Eclipse phase in downtime, you reset your transcendent track, you reset your stress track. Great. I want that. So the game is encouraging you that if you do become eclipsed during a mission, that you stay that way. Because if you leave it during the mission, you do not lose all your stress. You do not reset your transcendence track. And that means that you're kind of at a mechanical disadvantage. I'm not saying you wouldn't, but it's very cool that the game is encouraging you, dare I say, rewarding you to accept this temporary pain or discomfort. Now, is this game for everyone? No. I think very clearly not. A lot of players who want more of a traditionalist game where the rules are essentially a physics engine that reflect sort of something about the truth of reality. Forged in the Dark games are not this. I think that something you may have missed. You reset your stress and transcend at the end of episode. Yes, I saw that. I did think I see that. I didn't recall that specifically, but of course, in my mind, you might, whenever I look again, apparently not a lot of people play this way. I have met people who do play this way as well, though. So I'm not alone in this. When I play Forged in the Dark games, Scum and Villainy, Blades of Dark, I typically have anywhere between 2 to 3 scores per session, with 2 to 3 downtimes per session. So I play my game pretty fast paced. So in my mind, you know, if you reset your stress and transcend at the end of the episode, in my game, that might mean after several missions. So you know, that it would probably be more important to try to clear your stress after in the downtime than it would be maybe in the ordinary game. So who is this game for? Great question. Well, it's for people who want to tell complex stories about the internal struggles of people who have great power, but also great responsibility. It is not a power fantasy. It's a game that actually teaches you that power comes with its own set of problems. It is strongly, as all Forged in the Dark games, about creating problems. This is not a game that you try to beat. Despite what people say, that RPGs aren't games that you can win or lose. Yes, you can. You know, D&D, Pathfinder, these are games that you very clearly are set up for winning and losing. And we all know what that looks like, right? You beat the encounter, you get the XP, right? You get the gold, you advance the storyline, right? Those are games that you're meant to beat. Forged Dark games are not like that. And if you have players who are going to feel like, hey, I tried to do this cool thing. I rolled a 4 or a 5, so I got to do the cool thing. But then the GM made some bad thing happen. And in my mind, right, I'm thinking I'm being punished for trying to take an action. This is a game that wants me to do nothing, because whenever I take an action, something bad and stupid and lame and a complication happens, or somebody takes harm or something. That person is trying to win the game. And there's nothing wrong with that. Go play a game that you can win. In fact, games like D&D, when something bad happens to you, you aren't rewarded in the slightest. In fact, you are only objectively punished. And that means that losing or not winning is to be avoided at all possible costs. This is what gives rise to the concept of min-maxing and car op. And it's not because people are dirtbags. It's because the game is telling you, this is what I'm rewarding. I'm rewarding you not losing. A game like this is not that. This game, you want complications. You're playing this game because you want to see complications. It reminds me of like Legend of the Five Rings. You know, when my players sit down to play Legend of the Five Rings, they are expecting me to put them into scenarios which are going to test their loyalty and their duty to their heart versus their lord, whether they will show mercy to an enemy who has betrayed their entire clan, but honor dictates that you let them live. And they want to grapple with that tough choice. And really, there's no winning there. It's kind of like they're both bad options. Which one do you pick? And so there's a little bit of sadomasochism with playing games like this, I will admit, because you kind of want to see, because this is my personal belief, I don't want, in my real life, I don't want agonizing decisions. I want clear-cut, easy decisions where I win, everybody else wins, my dog wins, right? I don't want to have to make the Sophie's choice, right? Nobody does, right? It's like, you know, do you take the dream job that you've dreamt of forever, but you'll have to move and give up your relationship and say goodbye to your family, and you can't even bring your dog with you? Oh God, you know, torn between these two things. I don't want that in my real life. No, I want to be like, hey, here's your dream job. Also, it's located 5 minutes from your house. Actually, you can work from home with your dog in your lap while waving to your friends and neighbors. That's what I want in my real life. Okay. Because, you know, I want fun and comfort, but for a game, especially a game that's about stories, I want knife twisting. I want that drama and that tension because I don't want that in my real life. And God, hopefully I'm not getting that in my real life. And so if you're not getting that in your real life, maybe you still want to experience that. You just don't want to experience that for real. And so, it's the same reason why hopefully people, they play first person shooter games. I mean, hopefully they aren't like, oh, I really want to go shoot up a bunch of people, but they want to have the fun and the exhilaration and the excitement of that without having to actually deal with the consequences both to themselves and to others. Well, RPGs are the same way, except these are interpersonal drama. I don't want interpersonal drama in my real life. I don't want to have to make these kind of really tough choices that these heroic characters have to make, but I'm curious. And so role-playing games allow me to explore that. So this is a game that is about having to make these really, really tough decisions. And so I think that if you aren't a group or a player who wants to really sort of deal with these fundamental issues of, to quote, The Amazing Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's basically the core, of this genre, in my personal belief. I could be wrong. But, and so if you want to deal with that, Spider-Man's a more reasonable touchstone for me personally, because I know that a lot better. In the most recent Spider-Man movie, spoiler alert, everything's going to shit. And he realizes, hey, I can save everybody and I can save the world and the universe from collapsing, but I have to give up everyone and everything that I love, including my girlfriend, who I've been, longing after for years. And we finally have this connection. And he does, because that's what heroes do. And that's a horrible, agonizing choice to make, but that's what heroes do. So it's cool that we get to see that, and it's cool that we get to experience that and feel that. I'm glad it wasn't me. So that's where I think that this game is fundamentally the mostly about is how do you deal with the obligations and promises that you have to deal with in your real life, while also having this great responsibility of having this immense power that you need to use to also somehow stop this great evil thing from happening. And how do you balance those? And you probably can't. And so sacrifices have to be made. Things get messy. Things get spin out of control. And that's what makes the game feral and fun and exciting, but not what I would want to experience in my day-to-day life. I've met people like that, to be fair, in my life, people who literally want their real life to be full of drama and nonsense and just whatever. I have pushed those people out over the last, 10 to 15 years of my life. Thank God. So now I have relative calmness and peace. So, again, I didn't play the game, but I've played a lot of Forge in the Dark. I think this game is solid. Solid A. Happy to have kickstarted it. I can tell that these mechanics would work really well. The integration of the mechanics, the links, the Eclipse, using the Eclipse, the backward stress track, the series playbooks as a stand-in for the crew, as a way of dictating the flow of the campaign. Very, 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 very well designed. I actually kind of even like, I love the gather information change. That's awesome. The fact that the playbooks have specific questions is even cooler. I actually like that there's only 9 actions instead of 12. I think it's just easier to deal with. Anyways, sometimes I think there's too many in Standard Forge in the Dark game. So I like 9 a little bit better, actually. And let me see what else. Everything else, there's normal. I think it's. I also like the kind of the interesting strategic decision of when to transcend during a mission, and how much power do you need versus how much power can you afford to spend. So I think that's really, really cool too. I think it's great. So big fan. I'm glad I kickstarted it. Will I be getting this to the table anytime soon? Probably not, but I don't think I'm going to be getting any Forge in the Dark game, unfortunately, to the table anytime soon, at least not with my current group. We're sort of in an old school, not old school, but we're kind of in like a fantasy trad kind of mindset right now. But I love this. I love the design. And I mean, obviously the graphic design here is immaculate. I cannot stress enough that little things like having the third and fourth action dot be the star very smart, very brilliant. I'm actually going to bring it up again just because I think it's so cool. I love that the stress track is showing the evolution, right, of the eclipse as your character gains that eclipse. So cool. I mean, it's a small, very small graphical element, but it's very, very cool, especially as well, hopefully you did, but I know I did. I just saw my first solar eclipse in my whole life, and it was like one of the most awe-inspiring moment of my entire life. So very, very cool. Just brilliant design. I love the design of most of the Forge and Dark games, honestly. And this one is particularly nice. And they were able to fit in a lot of extra information on here. Cause like in Blaze of the Dark, right, you have your loadout and all your gear, and then you have your contacts. So that just eats up a lot of additional space. And obviously you have your transcendent abilities here, but there's still enough room in here to be able to put in these extra little reminder boxes. And I really, really love the small graphical touches. I like little fiddly bits like this that aren't too fiddly, but fiddly enough. I like paper and pencil, and I like erasing marks, and I'm a big fan of this, At my table, in fact, I have a bag right here because I've been cleaning out my things a little bit. Like I use, we just use glass beads all the time. Like these ones are kind of clear crystal beads, and then we have these blue beads, and I've got red beads and green beads. We love using glass tokens and stuff like that, poker chips, all that stuff. Good times. So yeah, brilliant, great. Designer clearly, and I appreciate that the designer didn't try to, throw the baby out with the bathwater. It is a fundamentally Forged in the Dark game. So, if you know how to play Forged in the Dark game, you know how to play this game. And I appreciate that. And I mean, there's a few changes, but even then they call back, they touchstone to mechanics that you would really know from other Forged in the Dark games. Like rolling your Eclipse roll with your lowest. Like that feels like a Vice roll. And so we're used to doing that, which I really like. So, yeah, I thought it was great. I'd love to know what you think. Leave a comment below. If you're interested in checking this out, I highly encourage you to do so. There's a link to Drive-Thru-RPG in the description below. It is an affiliate link. We get it doesn't cost you any extra money, but we get like $1 that we can use for financing future PDFs. And of course, if you want to support this channel and you want to be part of this amazing community, if you want to maybe be one of the 2 or 3 people that get into London's next Play by Post Girls by Moonlight campaign, then maybe you should consider joining our Patreon. We have an exclusive Discord that is only available to members of the Patreon. We have levels from $5 all the way up to $25. We even have a couple of super high tiers that give you really extreme benefits, merch, and all sorts of really fun access to games. But our community gaming is thriving. We are playing dozens and dozens of games each week run by community members, and most of them are not D20. Most of them are a lot of the games that we've been talking about here on this channel. We've got games of Forbidden Lands and Dragonbane and Traveler and Girls by Moonlight, and the list goes on and on and on. So, if you're a GM interested in running games, I recommend you check us out, because we have a player base that is chomping at the bit to play that new game, who will have no compunction about going and buying a $20 PDF to learn how to play the game that you want to play. I'm not super familiar with the rest of the internet in terms of RPG land, but I understand that this is a very unique group of individuals. Because if you go to a lot of places on the internet, the only thing that people want to do is, well, number one, it's all players and there's no GMs. I would say that of the 400 people that are members of the Knights of Last Call Patreon, I would say 350 of them are GMs, like active GMs, good GMs. And I would say like the other 50 are like GMs in training. I mean, like we have very few people who do not run games or have not run games. So everybody's running games. Number two, these are people who want to run games and they don't want to run 5e. So the games that are available are pretty much, all across the spectrum, from King Arthur Pendragon, again, and Traveler, to Girl by Moonlight. Secondly, we have a lot of GMs, a lot of people. But the other thing is people don't want to play the 5e. But the third thing, the most important thing, they're good. You know, I'm not trying to like I make a generalization, but like, you know, the quality of the players, the quality of the game masters is a lot higher than what you might see in just a random subsection of the internet. And the most important thing, everybody who's there paid to be there. Now, it might only be $5 a month, but you paid to be there. That means it really weeds out most of the trolls and assholes because people have skin in the game. They're not just some anonymous internet person. They had to sign up. They had to pay money. They could be banned, and then they lose that money. So, and we've only ever had to ban like 2 people in 3 years of doing this. The people who join are just of a higher caliber. It's an amazing community, and I cannot stress it enough. If you want to support me and the channel, that's great. Join the Patreon. But really, it's about the community. It's about taking advantage of the community, talking with these people, learning with these people, playing with these people. It's great stuff. A lot of people in chat today, Isaiah, Kyle, Solana, London, all members of the Patreon. So we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for stopping by tonight. I hope you are interested. And let me know if you're thinking about picking it up. If you want to talk Forge in the Dark, we have a whole Forge in the Dark section on our Patreon Discord. And, we'll be happy to talk about the game there. Mike says, you're making us all blush, Derek. We love you too. Yes. Well, you listen. One of the things I was the most nervous about creating a YouTube channel and then creating an online community attached to that YouTube channel was internet trolls and assholes. And by and large, we have very, 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 very few of them. I mean, you can't put 400 people together and not occasionally get people who rub you the wrong way. It does happen, but by and large, it has been tremendously successful. And Mike, I'll be honest with you, if it wasn't, I probably would have quit. I probably gotten out of the game. So the community is the reason why I have stayed and can continue to do what I do. Damien says the best money I spend every month is to get to tell Derek he's wrong. And Damien and I, we do not agree that often. In fact, one of Damien's greatest pleasures, I think, in the community at least, is when he gets me to look into something or try something that he's been trying to convince me of, and I agree. Okay, this is pretty cool. Like Sentinels of the Multiverse was a big win, Damien, I think. Whereas Marvel was not. So yeah, great men, great women, and all in between. Fantastic group of people, and very honored to be a part of their community at this point, really, honestly. So thank you for stopping by. Again, we are still technically in exile. That's why we haven't had a regular Tuesday show. Although if you remember the Patreon, you've been getting some bonus streams. And I definitely those will keep going on as we continue to move out of our studio space. It's very sad. But hopefully we'll be back with some Tuesday shows soon. Again, Tuesday is when I have the guys kind of on lock. And so, from their wives and their kids, it's kind of a given that the Tuesdays is spoken for. So we've been using that for manual labor. The teardown is going very, very well. All of the sets, all of the walls are down, all the lights are down, the windows are all down, everything's stacked up, packed up, ready to get moved out on a truck. We do have to take apart the table itself. All the cameras and microphones are packed away. There's a couple pieces of furniture I have to deal with. But we are going to have like one big moving day where we move all of it into a storage unit, because I don't have space to store it. So I'm gonna have to rent a storage unit. And that's where all the cool walls and lights and stuff are gonna have to live for a while we figure out what eventually we do. So, but yeah. And one of the top tier rants was in the Marvel video. To be fair, that top tier rant was not about Marvel. It was about Demiplane but yes. Anyways. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with me tonight. I look forward to talking to you in the future, and we'll see you next time on Nights. A Last Call. Good night, everybody. Peace.